Today on Abrasive and Proud of It, we're talking ladle turning. I'm Chris with Kling Sports Woodworking Shop, and today we're going to be talking about ladle turning. I'm part of the purchasing department and the technical team here, and so one of my jobs is to bring in specialty tools and see what's kind of out there and what's kind of trending at the moment. So today we're going to be taking a look at one of those things, and that is the Ladle Chuck. So first off, we're going to be taking this block of wood and turning it into something like this with what's called a Ladle Chuck. Looks a little something like this. So you can essentially take this ladle, stick it in here, and turn it off axis. And so you don't have to make a new jam chuck every time. You just, if you do buy this, it's a universal size and it works for just about everything. So before we get started, we want to talk about the size of stock we're doing and kind of talk about how to choose the wood. So this ladle chuck comes with these little jigs, and there's a bunch of different sizes. I just grabbed the two that'll be close to what we're doing. So if you take a look at them here, you really want to choose something a little bit underneath the size here. So this one's a little too small, and this one's a little too small compared to the wood as well. But once we turn around, where are we going to be at? So that's one thing you want to look at when you're looking at choosing your material. So for this project here, I'm going to go with this one. If this is your first time ever turning one, I would probably recommend something a little bit smaller. That way you have a little bit of wiggle room. I've practiced with this, so I feel comfortable that I can get something close to that arch and in between those two lines here for the spindle. And the reason you want that, you want to do this is because we have this arch here. We're going to measure out to make sure we get a perfect sphere, and that way when we stick it in these little plates, which fell earlier in the video, you really want to make sure that kind of matches up, and that way when we get done turning that it doesn't protrude through and it doesn't pop off the lathe spinning at a high speed. So we'll go ahead and get started. All I've done so far is I've taken my material and found my center line. Just took a ruler and found it. So we're going to mount it between the spindle here. And it doesn't have to be crazy accurate, but you do want to kind of get close. And I'm just using a live center and a drive center. And first things first, safety glasses. So before we turn on the lathe, we kind of want to figure out what side of the spindle we want the ladle to be. Because I'm right-handed, I'm probably going to do it like this, so I'm spending all my time over here rather than over here. So if that kind of makes sense, if I was turning it the opposite way, I'd struggle a little bit to get into those details, and over here I'd be strong. So with this one right here, we're going to do something like that. Okay, so I'm going to check my tension one more time. Now I'm on the highest speed that this lathe will go. Because we're spindle turning, you normally want to keep the RPM up, simply because as you get closer to the spindle, it's spinning more truer to that RPM. As you get farther out here, it kind of slows down. So I kind of want to turn at a higher rate, and also that way we get this project done quickly for the video. So what I'm using is a spindle roughing gouge here. I'm just going to simply remove some material here quickly. I'm just taking my body and rocking it like we've talked about in the past videos. And one way to check, like I've talked about in the past, is you can take the tool here, rest it up, resting on the material. If it's knocking around and bouncing like that, I'm still not round yet. So I'm going to Got some more material to remove here. See, I got a little bump right there. If I get over here, I got more. So I got just a little bit more to go. That should be good on that end. So I'm going to move the tool rest. Just kind of even everything out here. So first thing I want to do, bring my tool rest to the side. I'm going to start working on the bowl out, the bowl little lathe. And I'm going to take my little template, and I want to get away from this this drive center over here, because if I catch my tool into those prongs, it's going to be bad news. So with this little template here, we can go to the overhead. Yeah. You have the center line, and you also have each corner of it. So right there will be my center line. That'll be one end. That'll be another. And what that's for is so I know I can start right here and work my way with the tool and kind of round over the tool to both of those lines and kind of get a perfect sphere right out of the get-go. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my parting tool, stick it down on the tool rest, and just remove some material. And that way I don't have to worry about removing extra material. And also, I know I'm still kind of in that range of a perfect circle. Remove a little bit extra. Now what I'm going to switch to is I'm going to go over to my spindle gouge. This is just a standard 3/8 spindle gouge. I'm going to start at the top and kind of work my way over. Another little tip is you can start from the end and work your way out. That's normally what I prefer to do, simply because you can remove just a little bit at a time and work your way to that high spot there. Some people, as I said earlier, prefer to start in the center and work their way. But with this way over here, you can kind of be a little on the safe side with it. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking that tool and just simply rotating it. So I'm moving my body as well as rotating that tool. That's kind of the action I'm going with right there. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm actually going to switch hands with this. I'm normally right-handed, but I do have some practice with my left. I'm kind of even things out here. Now I'm pretty close to a sphere. I'm not perfect yet, I can tell that for a fact. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove that extra material on either side, because I don't need either of that material. So simply what I'm doing here is I'm sticking the tool, so my spindle roughing gouge here, and I'm rotating it on edge and kind of using it like a parting tool. So I'm just pushing in, and that really removes the material quickly. Rotate to the other side. I gotta be careful here because I'm close to the edge of my tool rest. I don't want it to fall off, because then I'll get a catch and hurt myself. So I'm gonna go to the other side now. I'm gonna start this way. You kind of see what I'm doing here is I'm doing a stair step action. That way I can remove off, say that's quarter of an inch at a time. If I had a bigger gouge, I could probably do a little bit more. Kind of even all that up. And then the reason I'm removing all that material is because if you look at my ladle here, I kind of want it to drop down and taper, and that way if you do end up using it, it kind of fits perfect in the hand. You don't have too much bulk material like I currently have here in the hand. So I'm going to take that little jig. I'd recommend turning off the lathe first. Wait for the lathe to completely stop moving. And then what this jig is for is you can take it and rest it on the wood. And right here you can see I have a little bit more material to remove. So first, if I turn the lathe back on, I'm going to remove material right here and material right here. And then that way I can work for that perfect circle. Let the lathe catch up first. Excuse me. And this is a basic turning tool set. So you don't really need anything special other than the chuck and the in a little while I'm going to use a carbide scraper to hollow out the middle. But other than that, it's just a basic turning set. Okay. Move some material this way. I'm going to go back to the spindle rough and gouge, remove some extra material. And if I stop the lathe, this cut I'm doing here is not going to be pretty. But I'm not after pretty. I'm after function. I'm not going to turn off the lathe. I'm just going to eyeball it simply for the sake of the video to keep it quick and easy. So I'm getting a little bit closer. You can see there. I still got extra space here, but I'm getting closer. And that little gauge is plastic, so spinning at this high rate, I normally recommend turning off the lathe, because this high speed will melt that plastic. Come back. And I will remove too much wood there. But I feel like it'll be fun. Yep, I'll be fine. So one thing you can do is you can take so in a basic turning tool set, you'll have a skew. So you can take this skew, and I'm going to move the tool rest a little bit closer. That way I have support. But you can take the skew and lay it flat on the tool rest. And what I'm going to use this for is a scraper. Kind of even things out. Now you do want to watch, because these little bitty points on either side of the skew will dig into the wood. So I want to make sure I'm using the center of the skew here. That way I don't catch and hurt myself. And I got my thumb on top of the skew. That way I'm sure my hand's not rotated in any way. And this material that I'm using is is aged cherry. It's kiln dried first, and then some guy bought a whole bunch of it and put it in a warehouse. So it's nice and dry, and you can see it's coming off powdery. And what this action does here is, I don't know if you can see here, but I'm a little uneven. So I got a high spot right there. And what this is doing is it's kind of evening it, taking down that high spot and evening everything out. So that's pretty much what I'm doing here. I don't know if I explained that well before I started it. And what I've done there is I've removed that center line because I'm pretty close to being round. Okay. I'm going to check it one more time, and I'm probably pretty close. Yeah, I'm pretty close. Now, you could spend more time like I did for this one and get it more perfectly round, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to kind of move along here. I do know I have a high spot here, so I'm going to work on that just a little bit more. And I'm going to call that quit. Okay, so I'm going to move along to the handle. Now with the handle, I want to put a little thought into it because you kind of want to make it proportional. So this one, to me, it kind of looks all proportioned. So you have your hand here and you have a little extra. One thing somebody mentioned this morning is they wish it had a little bit longer handle, and I can kind of see that as a function rather than aesthetic. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for this one. I'm going to take my spindle roughing gouge again. I'm going to remove some stock. I'm going to go back over here, kind of even things out. Here, as I'm doing this, I'm kind of getting a little on the thin side, so this material is starting to flex a little bit. So I'm going to tighten up just a smidge more. That way I know I'm nice and secure. I'm actually going to lower my tool rest just a smidge. Speed my lathe up too, since I got most of the material removed. And what I'm doing right now is I'm going to start moving along to having a nice shape. So down here I'm going to do something a little bit like this one, where I have those nice toes and beads. But down here I'm going to remove some material down here, but I'm going to have it tapered upwards. So like you can see in this one, it kind of tapers upward. And that way when you're holding it, it feels nice in the hand. So that's kind of what I'm getting into at the moment. And as I get close to the tool rest, to the end of the tool rest, I want to make sure I'm being careful. And so I'm going to come back this way, kind of even everything out. nice having this long tool rest because I can even things out in one go without having to move things. Move my tool rest to the end a little bit more, that way I don't fall off the edge. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove all this excess. I will not need it, but it's nice to have it out of the way. Okay, so far I know I'm still a little on the thicker side down here, but I kind of want to leave this material, but I do want to start making this smaller and this smaller as well. So my main focus right now is in between, I'm going to say that point and that point. So take my tool, remove some material. I'm getting a lot of chatter because I'm a little too far away. Remove the banjo in. You can see that got better. And so that's pretty good on that side. So now I'm going to taper downwards. Scared me. I'm going to do another kind of parting cut with this roughing gouge. And as I start to flex, when I get thinner, I kind of want to move a little slower. That way I don't snap this material. Because it will happen. I speak from experience on that one. So first I'm going to stop the lathe and kind of talk to you about what I'm kind of thinking here. So I'm stopping the lathe so I can feel it in my hands, because your hand will speak 1,000 times more than your sight ever will. Excuse me. So feeling how it is in the hand. So if I'm using the ladle, having it out here, it just feels nice to my hand right there. I know I got a little high spot right in there and right in there. So I know I need to work here and here. I'm going to take my pencil and mark that, and that way I can kind of see it as the lathe spins up here. And right now, getting rid of that high spot is where I really want to rock my body in between my feet. So my feet are shoulder width apart currently, and what I'm going to start doing is just rocking my body. And that way I'm not taking my hand and moving it back and forth, because I'll have a bunch of slop there. So if I take the base of my tool, I'm going to move up here so you can see it. The base of my tool is kind of in my hip right there. So it's nice and planted. And then I'm just taking my tool and rocking on my feet. Okay. Okay, everything's even right now. So now I'm going to switch back to my regular spindle gouge, clean off the lathe. Let me get over here. And this doesn't really have to be anything technical on what kind of shape I need here. I'm just going to do a little something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my tool like this. So I'm going to open up the flute this way. So I'm going to start with my tool like this, start the cut, and as I'm cutting, you can see my tool is rotating like that. And that's what I'm doing right there. Go back the other way. And if I had a higher fingernail or higher grind on this, I can get a little bit more detail. But as I said, this is a stock set. This is right out of the box. I didn't do anything to it before the video. I'm going to do another secondary cove. And that chatter right there is because I'm too far out here. So I'm going to bring this side of the banjo in so I can get a little bit close. On this angle, it's a little weird, but I know I'm going to have chatter anyways. So I'm just going to get in there as best as I can. And I'm just going to remove material. Because the next kind of little design I'm thinking about doing is something simple like that. And I'm actually going to switch back to my spindle roughing gouge because I got enough meat there, or enough width there, I should say. And I'm going to even everything out right there. Just take my time, even everything out. And I can get a little artsy with this if I want. I can take, we actually carry these from Ron Brown as well. He's the maker of the Ladle Chuck we're using today. And these are a wire burning set we sell. And I'm not going to get too technical on where I'm going to place these. I'm just going to find the center of that little dip there. Hold it down. We got a burn there. I'm going to go about an eighth to a quarter to the right or left of it. Got a burn there. Same thing on the other side. So that's how that looks. I'm going to do one in the middle of this cove. I need a little bit more there. So you can see I got a little something elegant there. I'm going to go to the other side. I actually don't need the banjo for this. But I'm going to do something down here. Because this is the part that will be in the hand. And this just makes everything look a little bit more professional. And I'm going to do something like that right there. Okay. So that just makes everything look a little bit nicer. You don't need to do that, but it just makes people a little bit more impressed if they look at it and they don't know much about wood turning, needless to say. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to both sides of the spindle here. I'm going to go to this side and I'm going to remove the stock down here. And so I'm going to feel it with my hand. I'm not grasping it while the lathe is on, but I'm just kind of floating my hand there. And that kind of feels nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to make that where the high spot of that ends. You really can't see it on the camera, but hopefully you can get the idea of what I'm doing here. And why I'm doing this is because I'm pretty much done right now. I'm done turning for the most part, other than removing it from the lathe. Okay. So I got pretty thin there. I'm going to go back to this side, do the same thing over here. And with this side, I'm actually going to take my parting tool and part right there where I think the end of the ball is. This lathe is fairly loud today. And so I'm good on that side. I could take that off with the parting tool, so I'm not going to pull out my spindle gouge and even things out there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to remove my banjo out of the way. Or your tool rest, not banjo, my bad. Now I'm going to move the banjo out of the way. And I'm going to take some sandpaper. And first off, I'm going to start with a 100 grit. And I don't need all of this. I'm just going to use the top bit here. And since I'm spinning so high, I'm going to crank down the lathe so I don't burn my fingers off. let the lathe kind of catch up to where I put it at. Right now I'm spinning at 2300 RPM, so that's good enough for me. And as I'm sanding here, I'm underneath the lathe because the material is spinning this way. The camera kind of makes it look like it's going that way, but it's actually coming this way at me. So what I'm going to do is take my hand underneath. That way, if the sandpaper does catch, it just flies out from underneath it, underneath the material, and misses me and misses anybody else. And I'm just going to take it and move it back and forth really quickly like that. Doesn't have to be anything real technical. And since I have a high spot here, I'm going to take the back side of that sandpaper and kind of round things over and just make everything look nice. And I'm going to take the sandpaper. This is our J-Flex material, so it's nice and bendable. So I can maneuver it and contour it in any way. So I'm going to take it, wrap it around my finger. You can see here what I'm doing. Wrap it around my finger and use my finger like a backing pad. And I'm not going to burn myself simply because I'm moving my hands and not giving it enough time to heat up. And now I'm going to take the sandpaper here and kind of bend it in half. And that way I can get into that little cove there. Kind of even everything up. And I'm going to work on the ladle part. And this will even things up as well as the skew that like I showed earlier. And you definitely want to wear a respirator for this, guys, because this dust from wood turning, it will affect your lungs. For the sake of the video, I'm not going to, just so we get done quickly. I'm pretty much done with the 100 grit. One thing I would recommend is turning off the lathe, let it get all the way slowed down, and then just take your sandpaper underneath or on top. This part really doesn't matter, but I normally like to go over top, wrap it around like that, and just kind of maneuver it back and forth. And the reason I'm doing this is because the scratches are spinning. So when the lathe is spinning, if you look kind of like these burn lines right here, it actually the scratches, if you look at it with a microscope, are this way. So what this is doing is taking them scratches and moving it to another direction. And I'm not going to get too picky right here for the sake of the video. I'm just going to show you kind of the ideology behind this. And this is 100 grit. Just starting course simply because this turning tool set I'm using, as I said earlier, it's right out of the box. So it's not the sharpest set in the world. If I did sharpen my tool set, I wouldn't have to start as coarse of a grit. At home, I probably would have started at 180 grit and then worked my way to 220 and so on and so forth. But hey, beggars can't be choosers when you're doing a live video. I'm going to turn the lathe back on. This is 180 grit. I didn't have anything in between this, but this is just something quick and easy in between grits. Move. Kind of get the back side of that piece there. Get in those coves. Take my hand flat and kind of work my way around this. I'm going to get out of line of fire of this dust so I don't breathe it in. Okay. Turn the lathe back off. I got that dust on my mouth. Turn off the lathe, go back and forth again. And that way, when you put a finish on this, them scratches really hide, and it just makes everything look uniform. Mike actually taught me this method. Okay, I'm pretty good there. So now after 180 grit, I'm going to work my way to 220, turn back on the lathe, and while the lathe's speeding up, get myself ready, turn it on. And as I get into the finer grits, I don't need to hold it there too terribly long because the lathe is doing the majority of the work, especially spinning as fast as it is. And the finer grits, most of the time, by the time the lathe speeds up, that's when I turn it off because it's working for me. Okay. Move on to the next grit. I'm moving to 320. Okay, I'm pretty good there. I'm going to work in this crack a little bit. I will get that later by hand sanding, because mounting it between centers like this, you're going to have some frayed wood on either side of the lathe. So Roger says, do I ever sand in reverse? Very, very rarely. I only ever sand in reverse if I have to start with a too terribly coarse grit. So like if I have a lot of tear out, like I'm going to turn off the lathe. Like I have a little bit of tear out right here, but especially on like something softer like basswood, or if you ever turn dried walnut tears out terribly, then I'll sand in reverse, and I'll normally start with like a 60 grit, and that's the only time I ever sand in reverse. Other than that, I sand in forward. Most lathes that come with a reverse, I never use mine. Really, it's a feature nice to have, but you don't really need it. Okay, turn the lathe back off. And go back and forth. And this won't be the prettiest ladle in the world, simply because I'm trying to do it in a timely manner for the video. Okay, I'm done with 320. I'm going to move to 400, turn the lathe back on, grab my sandpaper. Okay, and guys, we'll probably do a sanding video in the future. Right now, I wanted to get away from the technical videos because they kind of get boring, especially you guys watching them. I know y'all get bored as well as I do. I know you need to know them, but it's okay to hop around. So after 400 grit, I would normally take my a wet towel or paper towel or something like that, and then rub it on this. And that way, what happens is it raises the fibers. So imagine this wood like you would shaving. So when you get out of the hot shower, your hair stand up a little bit more, and so putting some water on this will raise the grain, and then you can knock it down with 600 grit, kind of like shaving. You just knock it down and it makes everything nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm done for now. As I said, at home normally I would pop the grain and hit it with a 600 grit, but I don't have that here. And so what I'm going to use now is I'm going to use Walrus Oil. This is a food safe finish. You can see here it's kind of separated, so always shake your finish before you use it. And what this is, Mike actually knows a little bit more about it, but it's mineral oil, beeswax, and a couple other things. Mike, if you know what that is, you can touch on it.
Are you talking about the Walrus?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, it's what you get. No, let's see. That's similar to it, the furniture wax, but basically you got carnauba, candelilla, safflower oil, which is the big thing to make it a lot shinier. And then, of course, your beeswax and your mineral oil.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. I use it for pretty much everything food safe. If I'm doing a bowl that I know somebody would probably use as a salad bowl or something like that, I'll go to Walrus Oil. And the main reason I like it is because it doesn't yellow. There's walnut oil out there, like the Mahoney's oil and stuff like that. That's good stuff, don't get me wrong, but it does leave a little bit of a yellow hue to things, like maple, especially with that white color. If you put that walnut oil on it, it'll change a little bit. And also, you got to be careful about the walnut oil, because I found my brother is actually allergic to walnuts. So anything I give to him, I cannot use walnut oil. So right now, I'm just wiping this on. The lathe is off. I'm just spinning it with my hand and getting it nice and soaked in. So now I'm going to turn on the lathe. I'm going to turn the lathe down a little bit. 1500 is what I'm spinning at right now. I'm going to apply some more oil to the rag here. And as the lathe's spinning, because this has beeswax in it, I'm going to kind of buff it in there and let that beeswax kind of buff and harden onto the material. And the reason I'm doing it now rather than at the end of the project is because this is the last time I will be at this axis in between centers. So right now it's easier to finish the lathe compared to turning it off and finishing it by hand. So that's kind of where I'm at on this one. And I don't need any crazy heat. The beeswax melts in there pretty easily. Now what I'm going to use next is the furniture wax. And the reason I use the furniture wax is because it has a little bit more stuff in it, and it also has carnauba wax. And the reason I mainly use it is because you got the carnauba wax. That wax will harden a little bit better. And just take it. You just take it and rub your rag around the wax like this. Kind of melt it a little bit because that carnauba wax will be hardened. And then you apply it like we've been doing. Mike, if you want to talk about this furniture wax, you can.
Sure. So what Walrus Oil has done with this particular product is when they added the carnauba wax, you can speed up the lathe, get a lot of heat, and then it'll set up harder and more shiny. So basically, it's a much better leveling process than you would get out of a friction polish or other types of waxes on the market. And so that's why I like it a lot for turnings, is because it does leave a much better, more durable, food-safe finish that's easy to touch up. If you're going to use it as utilitarian, you can easily touch it up with the same stuff, and it doesn't have to be on the lathe.
I couldn't hear you too terribly much, but Mike knows a lot about finishing, so I'm sure he gave you all the goodies about it. So I'm pretty much done here with finish. Other than either side of the axis, I'm pretty much done. And this stuff you can rub on with your hands, so you don't need the lathe spinning, but it's just nice to have. Let the lathe do all the work. I'm going to put my rag on a tripod here so I keep it clean. So what I'm going to do now, move my banjo back over here, grab my tool rest off the floor, and I'm going to take this off the lathe. There's a couple different ways you can go about it. I'll talk about both of them here. So what you can do is you can take it just with a parting tool, part it directly off. You'll have a flat cut on either side, or you can get a little bit more intricate with it like I'm going to do here. So first I'm going to start with my parting tool on this side, and on the other side I'm just going to use my parting tool for the whole thing. At home I have a collar that goes around the post of the lathe, so I don't have to worry about finding that center height. But I'm just going to take my parting tool. I'm still spinning about 1500 RPM, which is fine. I'm going to get that nice and narrow, and I'm going to say that's about 1/4 inch on that side. I'm going to go to the other side here, and right now I don't have to take much off of here. And that I took down to about 1/8. And you can kind of work back and forth which side you go to. For this side, I'm going to leave it at that 1/8 inch. And what I'm going to do is pop it off with my pocket knife. Once you get that thin, you can pretty much snap it. So I'm going to remove material over here. And as I said, you can flatten that off with just your parting tool, or you can get a little technical here and take your spindle gouge. Start with the flute facing upwards here, and taking my hand and rotating the flute that way. So if we can get, actually I don't think we have a close-up of this because it's out of the shot, but that's all I'm doing is I'm taking the flute like this, standing straight up and rotating it that way. Moving my body as well, and that way it kind of rounds everything over here. Okay. I got some extra wood over here that's in the way. And this just makes everything look a little uniform from top to bottom of the ladle. Take my parting tool. And what I've done is rounded that over, and I'm going to end it with a flat spot so it looks more kind of significant there. And one thing you can do, slow the lathe down a little bit here. And that way, if it does pop off, it doesn't fly off and hit us. Right now I'm spinning about 900 RPM. I'm going to take my hand over top. Take my parting tool in my other hand here. And just kind of go till it snaps. And there we go. So I still have this little nubbin here, and you can take it and just break it off. Simple as that. Take my pocket knife. Take my pocket knife here and carve off that excess wood. Probably should turn off the lathe so I don't have that drive center hitting me. And I'm pretty much done. I'm going to take some sandpaper here. I can take some sandpaper, clean all this up, put some of that Walrus Oil on it, and furniture wax as well. And we are pretty much done with the outer shape of this ladle. And next week we can actually mount it into that Ladle Chuck and show you how it goes. That's going to be a whole video on its own because it is a little technical. We can talk about different angles because this is going to be spinning on a completely different axis from where we were. In that chuck, it'll be spinning around like that. So that's going to be a whole nother video on its own. So for today, I'm Chris. We're almost all the way through with the ladle. Just a little bit to go. Anything from you, Mike?
No, sir. You answered all the questions. So thank you for joining us on Abrasive and Proud of It Live. Turning Thursdays with Turnmaster Chris. Join us next week when we hook it up to the Ladle Chuck and turn the ladle.
Have a good one, everyone.
Enjoy your day.